Evening. This video is going to be a little bit kind of back to my usual, or to my other kind of hobby. For those of you who know, um, I'm I have a little bit of a, I guess what you might call a mall ninja streak kind of going through me. I like knives, mountain bikes, watches, things that I think a lot of guys out there on bladeforums.com, for example, and Poor Man's Watch Forum, broadarrow.net, usual suspects, that sort of thing. I mean, those guys can sympathize. If you know the name Nothing Fancy, well then you're in the right crowd. Uh, I did videos on some of my other knives, like an M frame, because I was inspired to talk about that one because there weren't too many M frame videos out there. But at the time, my camera and my computer were giving me problems, and those weren't really great videos, so I might redo those at some later date. But I wanted to talk about one of my first knives after my pocket knife, which I left at the bottom of Lake Tahoe years and years and years ago. So I thought about talk about that, and I'm not going to go through the whole thing a la Not in Fancy style. He's just so pro at it. There's no one else who could even possibly touch Not in Fancy. He's got it down to a fine art, POU and all that stuff. But I'll go over some of the points that I think that that might speak to him, and to use his. I mean, everyone's got their different tastes for for knives, for EDC carry, flashlights, knives, concealed carry if you carry a gun. It's a little bit kind of dicey to do that, I think, in California, in some cities, anyways. But to use his terminology, your mileage may vary. So let's talk about this knife right here, which is, if you can't see it, I'll just point it down here. No, well, never mind. Here we are. It's a Cold Steel Voyager, and now this is not the first. This is not the first one I've ever had, but this is probably. I think this is probably my second Voyager. Cold Steel was probably my first brand. I first got introduced to these through my brother, who at the time was working as an ENT, not ENT, excuse me, he was working as a paramedic, and oftentimes he'd be in situations where he would come on a crash site and have to extricate someone from a car. So his version was the non-tanto version with full serrations. Now, I haven't dealt with Cold Steel in a long time because I've been carrying pretty much I've moved on to slightly fancier digs, but I do remember them being very well made at the time, and the knife market at that time was a little bit smaller. Sure, Gerber was around and Spyderco was around, but competition was overall a lot less stiff. And Cold Steel did make excellent knives. They weren't necessarily pretty, but they were very, very functional. I know that a lot of people don't like Cold Steel because of their advertising campaigns, and they're kind of rather unabashed about how how they do ads. So that's just generally how it goes. But the point here is to kind of talk about the history of the knife, and not really to get into the back and forth about who likes what company and why one company is better than the other. I mean, that's not really the point here. It's an Alice 8 steel blade, and I've actually since had to resharpen this thing, but I do remember when I first got this thing was just ferociously sharp, as are usually most Cold Steel knives. They're just incredibly sharp. I think one or two times this thing just kind of passed through my flesh. I didn't even feel it, and I think people have said similar things about Microtech knives, for example, being so sharp that you just can't even feel it. I did handle a Halo once, and it was yeah, that thing was pretty scary sharp. Alice 8 stainless steel. I think Cold Steel today has moved on to VG10 or something even better than that. This is an old one, you can tell, because it's got the stupid Zytel clip, and the reason I say stupid is because this thing has virtually no retention whatsoever. It's just pathetic. I mean, the first time that I ever got it, it might have been, it held a little bit, but The fact that they moved on to the metal clips was just such an enormous improvement. I mean, that in it alone, made me tempted to go get it. I don't know if subsequent Voyagers are any different, but there is not. This is not left-hand compatible, as you can see. And I've tried unscrewing that thing. Now I'm a right-hander, but I still wanted to check and see if that thing could be unscrewed and installed on the other side. No dice with this one, so I don't know if that's just bad or whatnot. Can't remember what the weight is. Weight is actually of a less importance to me because I'm not always trekking out like Nut and Fancy. Usually I go out with a like a Camelback Hog or at the very most a BFM, and I fill that up, and I'm pretty much good to go out for a 2-day hike trip. So I'm not exactly sure what the weight is, but Zytel handles G10. I mean, this thing has got to have been made in the. Oh, this has probably got to be a 2000 knife, maybe even a late 99. In fact, it's not G10; it's actually Zytel, and some people like that, some people don't. I think it's perfectly functionable. This thing has been used and abused. This is basically the G-Shock of my knives. This is much as hard use a knife, almost in my opinion, as as Emerson knives. Now, Emerson knives are cooler. I mean, to kind of get to the second type of cool, but they're certainly more ergonomic. That's one thing I'll definitely give Emerson. But this cold steel knife has served me very, very well, and I'm quite fond of it because, well, you know how things are. You get to a piece of gear and you've used it for a long time, you kind of grow attached to it. It's a lockback, as you can tell. So you're gonna be pressing the spring bar back, and that's the bad thing. Every locking mechanism after a while grows old and needs to be improved, or just goes through wear and tear. For example, this spring unfortunately is no longer very strong, so you barely need any strength to push it down at all, so it can disengage rather easily, which is why this thing lives in my backpack all the time, my Camelback Transformer. I don't EDC it also because this thing would just slip out. The edge retention on Alsate is pretty good, and I found that it's very serviceable. I've never had to send it back to Cold Steel to get it sharpened. I just use the Lansky stones with to great effect. I mean, I've used this in the kitchen as well, and it just slices meat so well. True, the Yakotse does kind of wear a little bit, but then with care you can make the edge. You can bring the edge back very easily with a diamond rod. Excuse me, a ceramic rod. One big thing I suppose I have to agree with Nut and Fancy on is this. It would have cost more money to put jimping at the top, but that's the thing. This thing's got no jimping whatsoever. It's only got this kind of, not half-assed, but this lip service excuse of jimping it right there on the Zytel, and the spine just continues on and smooth as glass. And it's not really like there's a lot of a choil built into the scale, so your hand could easily slide up to the blade if you're not very careful. If you're doing a thrust, so you have to have very, very good purchase on this thing. And if you're wearing gloves, well then God help you, because sometimes I found that gloves don't work very well with this thing. They just it's like not like butter, but certainly kind of an oily, greasy film. Be careful of that. No removing this blade. That's a big thing that a lot of people have about cold steel. You can't take them apart. Whereas opposed, as opposed to say like Emerson's, for example. I mean, that's part of the appeal with some of these so-called hard use knives, tactical knives, Strider, Emerson, Lone Wolf. You can take them apart. They have a very kind of scrapyard kind of feel to them, which is part of their appeal. Cold steel, in my opinion, is more kind of serviceable. It's a little bit it's the kind of louder version of Spyderco, although Spyderco has kind of it's kind seen the not the writing on the wall, but they've changed their marketing to reflect more of an Emerson-y, Strider-y, Mantis knives kind of feel to them. So things have changed up, blade tech, that kind of stuff. Cold steel is is used to be at some time in the past the only name of the game, and for a while they were also kind of high value. I don't know really what else there is to talk about. I mean, I carry this. Knives are a bit of a hot button topic for some people. For sheeple, I think is what us knife people call them, but they're a little bit less incendiary than say guns, particularly with the recent unfortunate shooting in Arizona. I'm sure Nut and Fancy has a lot to say about that. Um, you know, uh, you know his philosophy, which I more or less kind of agree with, is that gun control doesn't necessarily work, and in certain circumstances can actually be beneficial. So, um, well, being a knife guy, I'm not really one to disagree. So I'll try and post up other videos if you guys are interested in. If you're going to pick up one of these things, they can be easily had, not too easily. Secondhand, they're very good knives. Just make sure you don't get the ones with the stupid side toe clips, because once these break off, that's it. You're screwed. So go pick one up. Cold steel isn't all that bad. Yeah, just close your eyes when you look at their advertising. Forget about their DVDs. Hopefully they're doing something with that meat, like eating it or doing a cookout. And I will catch you guys later. All right.